welcome on behalf of Access. And now I'll give the floor back to our host on behalf of Tallinn, Leonard, to introduce our guest speaker.
Yes, so glad to see the new faces here. And now I'm going to refer back to my last slide, where we had the three main IAP challenges and key principles: data, decentralization, and participation. And the first speaker is going to be about data. So as I mentioned already, in Tallinn, we lack information and understanding about and of our communities, who does what, and you know, why some people don't take part in the cultural life as actively as they could. What are the reasons? What could be done to meet people's expectations better? And Kopli being an extra complicated area in regards to its history, the evidence of segregation, and identifying gentrification, we recognize that the regular service would not give us sufficient information and qualitative insights into the problems. So we need tailor-made solutions to establish the contact and start working with and for the local communities. And the Center for Applied Anthropology of Estonia is a research center. Their work is science-based, yet innovative and caring. So their in-depth research methods were appealing for us, and we're happy to share their best practices with you. So without further ado, allow me to introduce you Sigrid Solnik, CEO of the Center for Applied Anthropology of Estonia. Sigrid, please, the floor is yours.
Hi, thanks. Hello, everyone. My name is Sigrid, and I'm an anthropologist. I'll share my presentation also with you. You should see it now, right? Yes, okay, awesome. But me sharing my presentation means that I don't see all of you and I can't see the chat. So maybe all the questions and everything, we have time for discussion later on. So
don't worry, Sigrid, we'll keep an eye on the chat for you.
Yeah, okay, awesome. So as I said, I'm an anthropologist. So in my everyday work, I'm trying to figure out what people do, how do they do it, with whom do they do it, and of course, why do they do it? And from that, trying to answer also, among other questions, the question, what do people actually want, you know? And my plan for this presentation for you is to share some of my some thoughts on the essence of anthropology and gathering and analyzing qualitative data. And maybe some thoughts on what to keep in mind when actually going to people and asking them questions. And I hope that some of the thoughts will be useful for you also in your work. Would be great, I think. But to start, I'm actually going to ask you a question. Before I'm going to answer your questions. And you are probably familiar with Slido after this year of pandemic and online stuff. So please go to this site, everybodyslido.com, and you can log in or use this code 446131. And there you should see a question, and I'm asking you.
Can you just repeat that code for us, please, Sigrid?
Wait, I can. Yeah, somebody.
It's in the chat already.
Chat.
You can copy paste.
Thank you. 446131. And the question is, what comes into your mind when you think about coffee? Just put down the first thought. Emotion, taste, place, person, whatever. And we should get a word cloud here. Let's see. I don't know how many of us is here all together.
43.
Okay, so let's wait for like a couple more seconds so everybody can type in. But I already see we have the winner in morning coming up. I think everybody, you should be able to see the word cloud on your screens, right? Okay, I see Rebecca nodding. So okay. Morning and smell or aroma are kind of two winners here. Okay, thanks for everyone who typed in their answers and the ones who are still doing that. I always love to do this little exercise because I think it gives nice overview of the variety that the people have when thinking of coffee, but it and also the patterns that start to emerge, right? And the morning thing is kind of expected, and the aroma thing also, but then there are this little these other thoughts like Colombia or fair trade or stuff like that, that is not like the first thing that maybe for some people could come in mind. And this is basically what anthropologists do, right? We ask people, sometimes we ask people stupid questions, and then they are like, okay, I'll tell you. And then we kind of analyze and try to find out what does it mean, what they tell us. And I think this coffee exercise is also like, you can start with very mundane everyday thing, start asking about that, and you go down into that rabbit hole, and the whole new world opens up about the values of the person, about the habits of the person, about his or her their expectations, and stuff like that. So wait, I'll go back to the slides. So when one thing is what people say, right, and what you typed into this slider thing, but we have also found out already a long time ago something that was said by Margaret Mead, an anthropologist from the United States, that what people say, what people do, and what they say they do are entirely different things, right? So we see that if you want to study people, you have to ask, you have to talk to them, but you also have to kind of like watch them or follow them to see what they actually do. And here we have an example from our own practice. We call this study like milk study, let's say. We ask people like, okay, how much dairy products do you to consume? How much milk do you drink? And then there was this family who said that, no, we don't consume that much dairy. And then the researcher asked to see their fridge. That was, among other things, filled with cottage cheese and ice cream and stuff like that. And it's not that the person lied to the researcher. It's more like, okay, what is considered a dairy product among different groups? Or maybe at that point when the researcher asked, the family didn't kind of remember what is in their fridge, or maybe in a couple of days they hadn't really drank real milk, and that's why like dairy product milk thing came. So you have to ask, but you also have to go and see, and then there are a couple of things that anthropologists are interested in, and I think these form like the main principles or base issues that are good to keep in mind when when looking for qualitative data. And I just go over them and illustrate them with the examples from our own practice. Yeah, maybe could be of inspiration for you also. So we are very much interested in practices, but then also in the meanings of those practices. It's basically, okay, what does coffee mean to you? But also what that meaning that you give to coffee means on a wider scale. Like, why should we care? How this impacts other activities? How does it impact the coffee industry, or what impact it could have on public transportation, social services, or cultural consumption, for example. And there is this example about the habits or practices and their meanings from our recent study that we conducted with a group of students at the Tartu University. And we were trying to find out what young people around who are 20 to 25 years old, what do they think about intangible cultural heritage? And among other things, what we found out is that, well, young people especially spend a lot of time online, right? It's not a surprise, but what we saw or found out that is they check Facebook every morning, but they use it as a newspaper. They go and see what has happened and what is going to happen. And that's it. For sharing content, for sharing about their own lives, or for creating content, they go to Instagram or TikTok. They don't do it on Facebook. Because yeah, this creativity isn't for them, is not connected to Facebook at all. And I think why is it like this kind of piece of information, why could it be important, is that if you are someone who wants to engage with young people, who wants to invite them to participate in whatever cultural activity or to create something, it might not make sense to do it on Facebook, right? Because this is not the place where they create or where they share. So this kind of importance of listening to people and finding out what do different things mean to them. Because people at my age, well, we share the pictures of our dogs and kids and whatever wonderful scenery, but people 10 years younger, they don't do that on Facebook, right? Then we are interested in values and beliefs, right? And fears. Because these are the drivers or the motivators to our actions are hidden in values and beliefs and thoughts and stuff like that. And this is something you can't find out with a questionnaire, I think, the main thing. Then there's always this wider context that we are very much interested in, meaning it is connected to the meanings people give to their actions or their the aspects of their everyday. And for example, drinking coffee is never an act per se. It's always a part of wider cultural context. I think of coffee and fika in Swedish culture. You know, this eating cookies over the workday, that you have this designated time slots where you drink coffee. And what happens there is people form social relationships. And this is the context of social relationships is a place where coffee is drank. So they are very closely connected. Or when thinking about visiting museums, then it's never about museums only. It's about the understanding of free time well spent, or it is about understanding of what makes person educated or cultured. So this, like, yeah, it's never just walking into the museum, always wider context. And then we are interested in everyday culture. These collections of ideas, emotions, practices that form or constitute one's life. And here I think is the difference. If I speak about culture, I don't think only like theater or plays or street art or whatever. I think about, I don't know, breakfasts, or what people expect of children, or what do we do in cemeteries, and all these small everyday things. And I think in your context, the question actually is like, how does culture fit into the everyday culture? Sounds very philosophical also. And then we are interested in unexpected perspectives, right? All the weaker groups, or maybe the let's say, underdogs of society, people on the margins, people whose voices are not heard that often, like kids, for example, people with different disabilities and stuff like that. But also non-users. It's very easy to research people when researching, you know, why do people go to theater? It's very easy to ask that question from people who are in that theater. You know, they're there. You can reach them, and usually they're kind of interested in speaking about why they are there. But then all those people who never put their foot into a theater house, like how do you have to hunt them down, and you somehow have to get the information or talk with them about, okay, but what do you do instead of going to theater, or why you never go? What does theater mean to you? What does theater mean to you, in a sense? Yeah, so all these different perspectives, and we tend to think that people have similar understandings, but it's often it's not true. And then we are very interested in hidden obvious. It's kind of, we look for important patterns in obvious things. And here on the picture is, it's an example from Ellen Isaacs, who's an anthropologist in the States, who, among other things, has studied parking in big American cities, including New York. And they spent a lot of time on streets watching people park their cars. And then at one point they realized that, okay, all the signs we have in city space, the signs tell us what we cannot do. And they never tell us what we can do. And this is like, it's something that is around us. Everybody is rather used to. And you can't even, like, it might take some time to put the finger on the problem, you know, because when you start thinking about it, it's rather obvious. Of course, the sign should say that, like, if I have this 3 seconds to decide, can I park here or can I not? And I don't want to, I don't know, read all the signs and think in my mind, okay, what is the day? What time is it? How long can I stay here? Etc. And then we are interested in tacit knowledge, meaning this like silent shared understandings that are not expressed, that everybody does something automatically. There are reasons behind these actions, but when asked about it, this is not the first information that comes up. I think everybody has probably everybody has an example from their own culture. One example I could think of is drinking cappuccino in Italy. You know, it's a tacit knowledge that cappuccino is drunk during the breakfast, and no normal Italian orders this drink after the lunch. And if you are not local, you might not know that. Or another example I have is from Siberia, from 1920s, 1930s, when the Soviet Union finally reached the cold plains of Siberia, and they wanted to kind of make the local indigenous nomadic tribes live in one place. And they built kindergartens and schools and real houses and stuff like that. And among other things, they built cultural houses or cultural centers. And they named those centers red tents, because everything was red at that time at that place. red tents. And then after some time, they realized that, okay, no local goes to these cultural houses. And ethnologists started kind of like digging into the problem, and they realized that in the local tacit knowledge is that evil spirits and devils live in red houses. So no normal, like healthy person would ever put their foot into a cultural house. I think it's an impressive example how if you don't know the local context, if you don't know the tacit knowledge, you can just go so off with their planning, in a sense. And then we are very much interested in creating empathy, and it's, well, you don't have to like the people you research that much. You don't have to agree with them at all. It's important to be actually interested in what they have to say, or interested in what are their life words, in a sense. And yeah, and this genuine, sincere, like, interest and willingness to listen, I think, is the key to understanding the practices and values and whatever, hidden knowledge and tacit knowledge, etc. So this empathy thing, actually caring about what they have to say. And it can be rather challenging, I think, if you think about political leanings and people who are on the very other end of the spectrum, for example. And the first thought is to, I don't know, disagree, or say that, well, you're kind of stupid for, you're stupid for believing in that, or can't you see that it's harmful? And it very well might be harmful, or some of it probably is. But the key is like, okay, but why do they think like that? What are the fears behind their thoughts and actions? And from there on, there is the possibility of creating something, whether it is a discussion or an activity or whatever, that's also meaningful for them, that answers to their problems or their wishes and stuff like that. So these are the, let's say, baselines, the most important things, I think, to keep in mind when studying people. And then there's this question of how to get to the useful results, how to get to the realities of people and the thick data they have about their own lives. And what we do participant observation, right? It's connected to that don't only ask, also go and see. And participant observation is a scale between observing, being the neutral, like fly on the wall, and fully participating, meaning you just do what others do, you don't pay attention to anything else going on in the context. And it takes time, as Lennart said in the beginning. This qualitative data thing is rather time consuming. So going somewhere, hanging out with people, doing what they do, talking to them, it takes time and some skill, right? But we have used it in our practice, in our applied anthropology. It's always it gives a lot, in a sense that it's investment well made. We have an example from research we did at the Health Museum, where we studied what do kids and then families with kids in different age groups, what do they expect from museum? What are the obstacles for kids when they go into the museum? And well, what we found out, it seems also like obvious, but not really so, is that if you have one topic, I don't know, a health museum, the topic of brain, it needs to have activities for all age groups, so that the museum would be inviting to everyone. Because what we saw in the building and in the museum happening is this dynamics in a family where there was an activity or part of exhibition that was targeted only for, I don't know, kids up to 5 years, the parents were, after half a minute, were like, okay, I'm going to see what's happening in the next room. You can stay here and play, but well, I'm moving forward. Or then when the part of exhibition was targeted only for grown-ups, for example, a lot of text in very small letters, and the parents started reading, and then you have this 4-year-old kid who's like, mommy, mommy, mommy. So it's awesome to see this dynamics playing out, and it's very telling in a sense. There are the things you can, of course, you can do interviews, and they are very useful for some topics to discover. But this like actual social relationships playing out, like only participant observation. Then we do walk along interviews, which I recommend to everyone who has questions about space, city space, movements in space. The picture here is from our recent study in Tallinn, where we research how do people use a certain light traffic road that goes from, I don't know, for almost 15 kilometers through Tallinn. And and here you can see a gate, and then this local woman with a kid and a dog going through the gate. And what happened there was that next to this light traffic road is this industrial area that is kind of gated up. And if you are an outsider, you would never go there, because you usually can't walk through gates into factory areas. But there was this agreement, like verbal agreement between the owners of the industrial area and the local community, that local people can use this area to shortcut from the road to their houses. And again, like something that you wouldn't probably, that would be more difficult to discover when only doing interviews in some other place. But when walking with that woman, it's like, okay, you're going from here. Like, how come? Isn't this locked? And then no, there is this agreement, blah blah blah. So yeah, and also we have studied kids, the children, and how do they use city space, and they're also like watching children moving on pathways or sidewalks. It's rather telling. Then kids are rather afraid of cars. They never choose, when they're going on a sidewalk, they never choose that side that's on the car side, let's say. So they rather go next to the buildings, which for a grown-up might be a bit weird, because in Tallinn during winter time we tend to get icicles. So it's kind of dangerous, you know, walking too close to the building. But for children, as this car traffic they feel it's dangerous, they choose the building side. And then of course we do interviews, and I think like semi-structured in-depth interviews are awesome for intangible topics such as identity or power relations in society, representation, stuff like that. And we have here, we helped Tallinn Russian Museum to create their new expo that they wanted to target to the Russian-speaking community. And then over the course of the research, the outcome was that, okay, there is no such thing as Russian-speaking community in Tallinn, because the ethnical backgrounds are so different, and the identities are composed of different factors. So you can't, like being an outsider, you might say that, well, all those people, they speak Russian, they are a Russian-speaking community. People who speak Russian, they're like, nope, we're not. Useful to know that there is no such thing as general Russian-speaking community if you want to target your museum exposition at Russian-speaking community, I think. But also, when doing interviews, I think we always recommend that you have to take like 3 steps back and start from there. When the question is like, okay, people of Kopli in northern Tallinn, what do you want? What kind of culture do you want? Then people don't always know what they want, or they want things they have seen somewhere else, and it might not actually be the thing where they would actually go if it was there. So I have this story about museums again. When we studied the motivation of Estonians, the motivations of museum visitors in Estonia, then we had this interview with this older lady who was like, I don't know, 75 years old. And we asked, to start with, we asked like, okay, what do you do with your leisure time, with your free time? And she said, like, every free moment I have, I spend in my garden. I have my fingers in the soil. And at the same time, she was an avid museum goer. And what came out was that going to museums is not like a free time activity or leisure time activity for her. It was a social activity. She always went with her group of friends. For example, for birthdays, the birthday girl organized the tickets. Some lady's son organized a minivan. And this group of ladies of 75 years old, they went together to a museum. But it was not like, how do you spend your free time for that person? So these details might be good to know. And these are the things you get to know from interviews when you don't start off with, okay, what do you want to see in a museum? Or what can we do to make you go to the museum? I think. And then this wonderful, wonderful method of photo voice or video voice, where we ask people to take pictures or do videos or draw. For kids, it works the best to draw. And it's kind of, it gives the power, the initiative to the person, because when you're doing an interview, a usual interview, you have the questionnaire, you have the questions, and then you are kind of gently guiding the person through the topic. But here, the pictures are from this city light traffic road research, where we ask them to take pictures of good places and dangerous places and obstacles in space and stuff like that. So you can get to the point very quickly. Person has the examples from their experience. And we have used that same method also for museums. What did you like? What remained fuzzy, or what was uninteresting, and stuff like that. So yeah. And then the good question of tell us about your the biggest fails you've had when doing anthropology, like what can go wrong and what can we learn from that, is and I discussed it yesterday with my colleague, and we are like, okay, we haven't had epic fails. And I think the key to the key to that is that this anthropology or human-centered research is very flexible. If things start going sour, you can always change something. If one person says that, no, I won't talk to you, you just go and find another person. Okay, it depends on the size of the group, but still that you have this flexibility. And if, I don't know, if one method is not working for the person, usually you can change something to use bits and parts of other methods to make the person open up. And I think, well, we are researching the human factor. So what can go wrong is people, because people are, might be unreliable. You know, you have a meeting, an interview, you have agreed on a date and they are not showing up. Or they have said that, yes, I can give you the interview, and then their answers are yes, no, I don't know, which especially happens with children or teenagers sometimes. Or then on the other side, you know, like you do the interview, and I think what we found out is that people are not listened to enough, and people want to talk about their thoughts. And especially if we are researching the groups whose voices are not heard or who are the, let's say, underdogs of the society. And then they have the situation where there is an anthropologist saying that, yes, very interesting, tell me more. And then you form this bond, which is wonderful. And I'm always very humbled and thankful that people kind of open up and let me peek into their life worlds. But then we just had this example where it kind of backfired because the person we interviewed, they just kept calling and writing to the researcher, kind of, I want to talk more. And the researcher was like, whoa, 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 no. So it's kind of like the human factor is always, different things can happen. Usually good things happen. And then the question of control, I think, you know, you want to get answer, especially if you're not an anthropologist, just doing interviews, you know, trained in some other area. You want to get an answer to your question of what do I have to do to make this interesting for you? And the person wants to talk about their own things. And sometimes we don't have the patience to listen. And then we kind of might miss out important things if we force people in our own, let's say, frameworks and not give the space to them to talk or create or whatever. And then there is always with qualitative research is the question of subjectivity, the role, researchers' impact and researchers' glasses and stuff like that. And it's much wider discussion, right? Which science is more science and stuff like that. But I think, how do I don't know, we can never get rid of our experiences, our beliefs, our values. But for me, it's when I go to do research, I put on my anthropologist hat. And it's kind of, it's like theatrical even a bit, but I switched it at another role. And I'm like, okay, I'm here to listen. I'm here to understand. And what I think is not really, like, it doesn't matter at all. And it's an important thing to keep in mind, especially if you are a professional who's studying the users or people living in a city, that you might think that that the best solutions are in your head. But you know, the best solutions that you think are there might not be the best solutions for people. So that's why it's important to just like put them on the side for a bit. Yeah, and I don't know, to conclude, maybe is let people surprise you, go to the people, go and like, how do you find, what we do is, I don't know, we want to find out what older people think. We go to the places where older people are and we talk to them. And this is like, it's the only thing, there's no other way. You have to go to the places where people are, and then you have to like watch the people, talk to the people, and you have to like let them to surprise you, I think. And the content might be very valuable. Yeah, so thank you. With this wonderful note, I would end my presentation, and I'm ready to answer all those 25 questions. I just saw the number, I don't know what's, I see, okay, I'll stop sharing. And
people have been incredibly engaged with your presentation, Sigrid. It's been absolutely fabulous. And I think people are really inspired. We've got a lot of appreciation for some particular highlights like life words. And I like to let people surprise you. And we also have lots of questions about how we can take the learning that you have and your experiences into the Access project. So going back a little bit in your presentation, Alvaro picked out the point that you made about speaking to non-users rather than users of a service if you want to understand. Could you tell us a little bit more about how you practically do that? how you identify people, how you find them, how you reach them, how you might persuade people to take part and begin a topic about a conversation which at some level you know people aren't interested in.
Yeah, I think this the question about how do you convince them to take part is is one of the important ones, because when people are actually interested in whatever museum, theater, public space you're researching, then you can always say that, yeah, with your input we can make it even better. But when the person is like, well, I never go there, I don't care, you know, then you don't have that card in a sense. But well, how we do it is that we use all the contacts we have. We use all the possibilities of social media, whatever, friend of a friend of a friend, and we ask like, okay, do you know someone who has not been in a theater in past 3 years, for example? And this is the way how we find the people. Or for example, when studying that city space, we had those days of participant observation when we were out there, and just like found the person like hanging around between block buildings, and we were like, okay, do you ever use that road over there? And the person is like, nope, I don't. And then the conversation goes on. And there's always the possibility that that you get the negative answer of, I'm not interested in talking to you, but the only thing that helps is to find another person, because you can force somebody to answer. And then I think this people actually love to talk about themselves, and they don't have that many possibilities to do it. I think it tells a lot about our culture or us as a society, and it might be different in other cultures, right? But here in Estonia, at least, people have time than they usually are, if they are not overused, in a sense. Sometimes it happens in the public sector, you know, like when we're talking about who are our social partners and what do they think, and then there is this constant qualitative data gathering going on, that in every 2 years people are asked something and then nothing happens. And the partners are like, I'm not interested in answering your questions at all, because like it doesn't matter what I say. So yeah, so I think the answer is a good answer to that question.
The friend of a friend approach has really chimed with Lisbon, and a thing that we keep coming back to in Access are the two themes that you've just brought out for me there, that these things take time. You have to allow time, and you have to be the person that you say you are. You have to be trustable, and there has to be clarity about what you are doing, what you can do. You can't just keep asking people questions for no reason. So important, and I think everybody has spoken to us about that.
And I think it's also maybe about the non-users, or all the people in general. It's like the questions you ask have to make sense to them, right? So if you, let's take this example of a theater. If there's somebody who never goes to theater and they're like, okay, why don't you go? Or what don't you like about theaters? Or what should be there that you would go? So this is for the person a bit difficult maybe to relate. So it might make more sense to be like, okay, but what do you do with your free time? Or where do you go with friends? And what is good entertainment to you, for example? And from that side, the stories start unrolling.
Thank you. That was a beautiful tip, which I think we will all hold on to. And I think that links to the to another point that lots of people were talking about in the chat. You spoke about tacit knowledge, things that people know, but which not everybody knows necessarily. And I think that really resonated with this idea of cultural inclusion. Could you talk a little bit more about how you would discover those that tacit knowledge? Angie said, you know, making sure that people understand that, recognize them is really important for creating empathy. And in places with lots of different cultures, understanding other people's tacit knowledge is really key. So we'd love some more of your practical experience here, Sigrid.
I think yeah, I'm trying to think of different examples. I think with the tacit knowledge is it is again related to sometimes letting go your questionnaire or your plan and following the people to the places he or she takes you. Because the tacit knowledge is that nobody, like it's not expressed in a way. It kind of, you can approach it only from with a like a bigger round, or I don't know what's the word for that. And also like this, the why question. Just for example, this example of Italians and cappuccino, or in Tallinn, when one time, long time ago, when there were tourists in our city, all the locals knew that you don't, in the middle of the summer, if you want to go from North Tallinn to, I don't know, to a huge shopping center in the center of the city, you never go through Old Town because it was overfilled with tourists. You always chose a road around it, in a sense. And it is tacit knowledge. Everybody, like, if you're a local, you know there are these masses of tourists there, which is actually also good on one side. And the only way to find out about it is to ask, okay, why do you take this road? Why don't you go like the shortest way possible? Or with the cappuccino thing also, like, why do you order espresso if you just in the morning you told me you like cappuccino? You know, like this, you see something and then you ask why. And the same thing with interviews, that you get the answer and then you go further and you ask why. And then the tacit knowledge, I think what is one of the keys to qualitative data, not the data itself, but the way you analyze it. You never analyze interview per interview. You know, you take them all together and then you try to find out, okay, what do they tell? What are the common themes? What are the patterns? Okay, this person does not have the same opinion as the others. What might be the reasons behind that? And then the tacit knowledge comes from this future block of interviews or observation reports or whatever you have. That these are these like red lines that come up again and again and again in the stories of people. So
thank you, that's helpful. I'm also thinking from what you're saying that maybe sometimes you find the tacit knowledge when things go wrong. If you do set off through the center of Tallinn, through the old town in summer, you discover that locals don't do this. Or if you do order a cappuccino, locals will tell you that we don't have that later, or laugh.
And I think it's also like, do you know that, and the question is that whether the researcher knows that the tacit knowledge is important. It's also, we had this research about people calling to 112, to the emergency phone, and the client wanted to know how people call it, why they like. Basically, they wanted to know whether they should develop other options next to the simple phone call, whether there should be an app or something. And then from different interviews came this theme of, yeah, an app would be, yeah, probably good. You know, you can do the video call, you can share the location right away. It wouldn't be like, I'm in the middle of the forest, I don't know where I am, please come and help me. But I would never install it in my phone because it brings bad luck, you know. And then there is the question whether the researcher understands that, okay, this is an important thing. Like this is a cultural understanding that might not be too common, but there is amount of people for whom it is an obstacle for using that kind of app, maybe. Or you are a researcher who's like, okay, whatever. What are the ways we like, how much cooler this app should be so that people would use it? So it's like,
so listening to what people tell you clearly plays an important part. We've got a very important question from Chetna in London, which is echoed in quite a few of the other questions, which I want to make sure we get to before the break, Sigrid. And Chetna's saying that everything you're telling us is really, really critical, but we have limited time, budgets, resources. So how do we incorporate this into our daily work if we're not trained, if we've got limited time? Is there a simple framework that we can follow, or does this really only work when we have trained anthropologists or similar researchers? And I think the other side of that coin is, do people only listen when this information comes from a trained anthropologist? So how do we actually do this ourselves, and how do we make it resonate with people if we do it?
Okay, like 2 parts in my answer. First is, people sometimes tend to listen better when it comes from a trained professional. So, you know, there's something about the human-centered approach that you have been telling your boss for a very long time, and the boss only listens when somebody from outside comes and says the exact same thing, right? So I don't think it's only about anthropology. But the question of resources, of course, like a part of it you can actually do by yourselves as well when you're not trained, or you don't have like a year for field work and stuff like that. I think the very first question is that who are the critical groups you need to study to kind of to narrow down the focus? Because when we're entering into projects, we usually we want to study everything. We want to know what every people want, but what the whole of the city, like how do they use this place, which is great. And then we're always like, okay, it takes 5 years and costs that much money, and then this reality check kind of comes in. But
yep.
But then again, like maybe for some groups you already know something because you are part of that group. Your colleague is part of that group. Like who are the groups that that you don't know anything about? You kind of like narrow that one down, and well, with the questionnaires and stuff like that, it always helps if you have somebody trained in anthropology, sociology, and or something like that to help you work out the questionnaire. But you can always go and yourselves. Usually for professionals in municipalities, the biggest obstacle is to leave your professional identity behind, leave all the things you know, what are the good solutions behind, and go with this open mindset. I think if you can like overcome that thing, there's already a lot of things you can do by yourselves. And sometimes we like to send people or decision makers themselves to the field. Because for some people, this contact with actual people living in the city is not something they have every day, and can be very eye-opening. So.
Thank you, Sigrid. Again, that was super, super valuable. It's sad to acknowledge that sometimes you do need to have the information that you know validated by an external expert, but I do think it's important to keep hold of that when we're thinking about how to ensure that our learning through access is embedded and is understood elsewhere in organisations. And that point again about stepping out of your own personality, stepping out of your own role and just listening to what someone has to tell you. It just keeps coming back again and again. We have lots more questions in the chat from some simple references to some more philosophical ones, but I'm going to have to sadly draw the session to a close so that we can have our break. Sigrid, if you have a little bit of time, either now or later in your day, would you mind just giving us a few more answers to the burning issues that we have posted up?
Yeah,
we're very grateful for that. Thank you. And I will hand to Corinne to thank you formally on all of our behalves. But that was superb. Thank you.
Thanks, Rebecca. Thank you, Sigrid. That was so very, very helpful and interesting. And